Happy Coming Out Day. Stephanie and I wanted to show that video, not only to introduce the idea that now there are many more options than being straight or gay, but most importantly because it's funny. And we want you to know that it's okay to laugh and to have a sense of humor about this.
In terms of understanding all of the terminology currently being used around gender and sexuality, we in this room have different levels of familiarity with the words, and that's okay. Today, we're going to learn some of the terms together so that we're all closer to being on the same level and speaking the same language.
So yes, you are getting church school today, probably different than the church school you grew up with, unless you grew up in here. It used to be so simple, right? The doctor announced, it's a girl, or it's a boy. You grew up and married someone of the opposite sex and had 2.5 children, and everyone was the same.
Except they weren't. We were never all the same, but many people had to live inside a box that society told them was their only option.
We've gone from living in boxes to now checking boxes, and that's okay, because there are a lot of options now, and we can choose to identify ourselves in an authentic way using many different terms.
First step, sex.
Woo!
Not that kind of sex around.
So, first, we're going to go into the issue of gender. Sex, or biological sex, is the term used to refer to the anatomy, chromosomes, and hormones that are assigned at birth. A person's biological sex can be male, female, or intersex.
Many people have assumed that biological sex is the beginning and the end, but we now know that it is sometimes separate from our gender identity. Gender identity is a person's internal sense of who they are in terms of gender.
And gender is not either or. Gender is not binary. Gender identity can be man, woman, both of these, neither of these. Some current terms include gender fluid, non-binary, gender queer, and gender non-conforming.
And though these terms are new, the idea of somebody being outside the gender binary is not. In India, the term hijra has been used since the 1800s. In Samoa, Fontaine is the term for the third gender. Among the Lakota and the Blackfoot tribes, there were people described as two-spirit who were treated with great respect. And separate from gender identity is gender expression. This is how an individual expresses masculinity, femininity, both or neither, through how they appear, behave, dress, talk, etc.
So, sex, gender identity, gender expression. But what about the terms transsexual, transgender, and cisgender?
Well, transsexual is a term that referred to people who medically or legally changed their sex. Transgender, which is often shortened to trans, is used more often now, and is an umbrella term for anybody who transgresses dominant conceptions of gender. Cisgender, which is spelled C-I-S, is somebody whose gender identity matches their biological sex they were assigned at birth.
I never really hear transsexual anymore.
Not really, no.
Next up, sexual orientation. Homosexual is not actually a term. As far as I know. After the service, someone is going to come up and correct me on this. But it is not just about gay or straight anymore.
The ones you've probably heard the most are gay, lesbian, and straight. Gay usually means a man who's attracted to men, but it can also refer to anybody attracted to people of the same gender. Lesbian is a woman who is attracted to women. Straight is a man attracted exclusively to women, or a woman attracted exclusively to men.
So all of those terms are what is called monosexual, someone who is only attracted to members of one gender. But there are also those who are attracted to members of multiple genders. Bisexual is someone attracted to one's own gender and people of other genders. Pansexual and omnisexual began being used in the last few years, and it's to be explicit that one is attracted across all genders, not just the gender binary of male and female.
And there are those outside of all that. Asexual refers to somebody not sexually attracted to anybody. And that's one reason why we have the term affectional orientation. Because somebody can be romantically attracted, but not sexually attracted.
Really?
Really. And this is one of those big messages of all this. Our individual experience doesn't define the experiences of others. We may not understand, but that doesn't mean it's not real for somebody else. Some people think cilantro is delicious. Some think it tastes like soap.
And they're both right, because it's about individual experience.
And then there are the differences about how we practice our relationships.
Right, our relationship orientation. Monogamy. Monogamy in recent history, not in long history if you read your Bible, has been what has been accepted as the norm. But there are individuals who are deciding that something different fits them better. Monogamous refers to someone who has only one romantic partner for a period of time.
Polyamorous is an umbrella term for somebody who can have more than one romantic partner for a period of time. This can take many different forms, from couples who have open relationships to multiple people agreeing to be in a relationship together.
Polymonogamous, I know, it seems like there's an argument in there, but it is the term being used for one of those relationships that falls under this umbrella of polyamorous. And it's 3 or more people who are in who decide to form a closed relationship, only being romantic with one another.
So there are a lot of different boxes that make up our identities. It can be confusing sometimes. I'm sure you feel like, why all these labels? Why can't people just be who they are without the labels? We sympathize.
And you can't. Because there is no world without labels. To be without a label means that someone else assumes what your identity is. And the default, the perceived neutral or normal, is cisgender, heterosexual, monogamous, which we may look like and it may not fit.
One's identity is not dependent upon one's relationship status. If you're straight and haven't dated anybody in 20 years, you're still straight, right?
And we can't assume. For example, only one of us is straight. I am a cisgender, monogamous, bisexual woman. Always have been. I met my soulmate when I was 19. I have been married to him for 25 years, and I hope to spend the rest of my life with him. I didn't pick him out of all of the men in the world. I picked him out of all of the people in the world. And my self-identity has never been as a straight person. I like this quote by Robin Oakes. I call myself bisexual because I acknowledge that I have in myself the potential to be attracted to people of more than one gender, not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily in the same way, and not necessarily to the same degree. My friends, my family, my kids, they all know that I identify as bi. Because I am in a happily monogamous relationship with a man, the assumption that everyone makes is that I am straight. And I never really thought about it until a few years ago. Many of you who go here know that I am co-host of a UU weekly webcast called The View, V-U-U. But you don't know the origin of the show. I was applying to be on a UU denominational committee, and as I was filling out the form, I called my friend Meg Riley, who is a UU minister, the founder of the Standing on the Side of Love Foundation, and an out lesbian activist. Said, I'm filling out this form for the UUA. I've never had to do this before. On this form, I have to check whether I am gay, straight, lesbian, or bisexual. What do I put? She said, in this case, this situation, what they are looking for is what community you represent. She said, so I think you should put straight. I did. And we ended that conversation by saying, you know, we should have a show where UUs can have discussions about these kinds of things. And that's how The View was born. I think that checking straight at that time was an accurate representation of the community that I represented. I was living with heterosexual privilege because I did not choose a label. And I've come to feel that I think that that is a mistake. Even though nothing has changed, my marriage is still very strong, Tom is still the only person I want to be with for the rest of my life. I am bisexual, and I do represent the bisexual community because this is one thing that it looks like. A bisexual, monogamous, cisgender woman married to a heterosexual, monogamous, cisgender man. I guess I'm coming out.
And somebody coming out is really only half the conversation, because hearing somebody own their self-identity and affirming that you truly see them as they are is the other half. And when Joanna and I started talking about this, we talked about coming out and disclosure, and they're kind of two different things for me. I feel like I wear my trans identity on my face. I feel like if you meet me, you're going to know I'm trans. That's the perception I have of myself. But a few years ago when I was working at Dell, and a coworker of mine made some very disparaging comments about the gay and lesbian community, and I was taken back and I didn't know what to do, and I sat and wrote him a letter and I handed it to him thinking he's just going to get angry because he's already mad at these queer people. And when he read the letter, he came over to me, he hugged me, he said, I'm just a poor southern boy from the south and I've never met anybody different and I didn't have any clue. And he just so wholly embraced who I was and loved who I was and accepted me. And there was never a question about who I was afterwards. And I think that's why it's important to come out, to share, because when you know somebody, you're less afraid of them.
I didn't truly understand how important this affirmation was until a few days ago. This week, the View's topic was bisexuality, and ironically, I was not on the show. I had a long scheduled doctor's appointment, but I watched the show afterwards, and Meg, with my permission and without naming me, told the story of our conversation. And there was something in hearing her say, but she's bisexual, in this completely casual, matter-of-fact way that just nestled in my heart. And I felt affirmed, and I felt seen. And it had never occurred to me that I wasn't.
We've shared with you some of the terms that are being used around gender and sexuality, but there will continue to be more, I'm sure. And right now there are generational differences around some of the terms.
Back in my day, bisexual was a fairly open term that didn't only refer to the gender binary. You could use it to mean that you were attracted to any gender. But those young people today, they want to be more clear about that, which is not a bad thing, and so they will often say pansexual.
We often say LGBT, but more and more identities have been added to that. Some, if they use the alphabet soup, will use LGBTQIA, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual.
And some, not wanting to leave anyone out, will use LGBTQIAA. Really? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, ally, pansexual.
And there's also the acronym QUILT bag, queer and questioning, intersex, lesbian, transgender, and two-spirit, bisexual, asexual and ally, gay, and genderqueer.
Which leads us into one of those other interesting generational differences, perhaps the most divisive right now, the word queer. Many in the younger generations, tired of alphabet soup, are embracing and reclaiming that term.
Whereas those a little bit older, I don't think we have any of those here. They have not so fond memories of it being used as a slur and try to avoid it.
And the beat goes on, and as we discussed, 2 days from now, it's going to be even more changes, more words. That's just how it works. But an interesting tidbit is that some cisgender straight folks, do we know any of those?
Sure.
Are having their own coming out as they decide to ally themselves with those outside of the cisgender heteronormative culture. Ally, as you heard in those alphabet soups, is part of it. So if you wish, if you are cisgender and heterosexual and monogamous and all those things that we used to call normal, you too can claim a queer identity.
So, however you identify, you'll have a chance this week to show your allyship. Thursday, October 15th is International Spirit Day, when everyone is encouraged to wear purple to show solidarity and support for LGBT youth who are victims of bullying. It is so easy as an LGBT to feel completely alone, visible to bullies, invisible to anybody who can help. Knowing that there is a world of people out there wearing purple, flying rainbow flags, and maybe even some church covering their building in rainbow flags, it makes a difference.
So, come out, whoever you are. Own your identity, affirm the identity of others, and let your rainbow flag fly.